The dogman seems to be all the rage lately in cryptozoology circles, and from the best I can tell, the stories originated in the Michigan area as a cryptid native to North America. Its range has started to spread, though, with more and more sightings well outside of its original stomping grounds. The creature has even begun to pop up here in the comments of various videos. We've touched on the dogman briefly in our presentation on the beast of Land Between the Lakes, but still the subject keeps coming up. It'll have to be a subject I return to one day after a good old deep dive into the lore. But for now, I thought it would be best to set some dividing lines first. Another older presentation I've done is on Emily Isabella Burt, otherwise known as the Georgia werewolf. The reason I bring that up here is that I've noticed people who are getting their first introductions to werewolves and or dogmen often equate them together as the same thing, and well, that's not the case. It's not your fault, though. We can all thank Hollywood depictions of werewolves for that. Now, I don't consider myself an expert by any means, and there's no doubt that the comment section of this video will get flooded with comments attempting to correct me on this or that. That's okay though, because you all know I'm open for it. But in a nutshell, from my understanding, there are a lot of differences between werewolves and dogmen. The main one being that a werewolf is a human that gets triggered to change into a wolf, typically during a full moon. Whereas the dogman doesn't change. It's always a dogman, therefore not human, and many speculate that it never was. When a werewolf changes to its beast form, it transforms into a wolf fully. It could be a larger wolf, but it's still a wolf. Think of it this way. If you have a 250-pound man that is a werewolf, during the full moon, you get a 250-pound wolf. The dogman, on the other hand, is always in creature form, a hybrid-type creature between human and wolf. Large, hulking, bipedal creatures, described as 8 feet tall or more. About the only common factor between the two is their methods. Both dogmen and werewolves operate on a primal, animalistic nature, the need to hunt, and the thirst for blood. But what if I told you that here in the South, we have something in between? A creature often confused to be one or the other, or sometimes both at the same time. Locals know it for what it is, though, and know the dangers behind it. A being that can shift from human to creature at will, and no matter its state, it retains its consciousness and human intelligence, giving us a creature that, instead of being driven by instinct, it's driven by malice, revenge, or sometimes just pure hatred. Deep in the sugar cane fields and swamps of Louisiana, locals call the creature a Rougarou. A creature born from a curse, a creature driven by a curse. Reported sightings are scarce, but there's good reason for that. Simply talking about what you saw, they say even that can bring the curse down on you. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. In the late 19th century, a prosperous businessman by the name of William left the city of New Orleans behind. Not for good, mind you. He held on to all of his business holdings, the successful ones anyway. But this time, what had begun as a small investment venture in the newly developed town of Ruddock, Louisiana, had given William an unexpected turn: a wife. The young woman Madeline and her family didn't live in Ruddock, but close enough in a small town called La Place, between Ruddock and New Orleans. William had given up on trying to talk Madeline into moving back to New Orleans. She refused to leave her family. It all worked out in the end, though. Living in La Place put him even closer to Ruddock, and New Orleans was just a quick train ride away. Business kept William late in Ruddock one night, and the last scheduled train had already departed for the day. This was nothing too out of the ordinary for him, though, and it was common enough not to cause Madeline any worries. William made his way through the stilt-raised town of Ruddock to the edge of town, to the Owl Saloon. Sure, it was a seedy place, discreetly hidden from plain sight, but it was the only place one could find a room for the night. It was that, or lodge with his business associate, C.H. Ruddock, and well, William preferred the gentleman's entertainment at the Owl Saloon. That night, there was a young hunter there, bragging and boasting about his trapping skills, and to hear the man talk, there was nothing in those swamps that he could not catch. William just snickered to himself as he made his way to the bar. Liquor and whiskey flowed throughout the night alongside the tales of the young trapper, and the more drunk William became, the more aggravated he became at this young man's outlandish stories. Or maybe it was because of all of the oohing and aahing the stories were getting from the saloon's women entertainers. Either way, William found himself wishing that the trapper would find himself lost in the swamp on his next excursion. And that's when an idea jumped into William's mind. As exaggerated as these stories were, William had heard worse, and he was reminded of one in particular. One that he had heard from his wife and her family on a few occasions. Now, what was that creature called? And then it came to him. "Hey boy," William called out to the trapper, "you say you can catch anything that's in these swamps?" "Yes, sir," the young man beamed with a lift of his shot glass. "I can even catch a man, if needed." He downed his shot, then added with a wink, "if the price is right." The room erupted into cheers, and William, not knowing if the cheers were because the young man spoke truth, or it was simply the alcohol talking, he let it slide. "Have you ever tried catching a rougarou?" William raised his voice to be sure that the trapper heard him. William smirked and kept his eyes on the young hunter as a hush fell about the room. The young trapper finally broke the awkward silence when he felt all the eyes turned on him. "Men don't hunt the rougarou." "That's right," another man spoke up. "If anything, it's the rougarou that hunts man." William found this all amusing. He had gambled that the hunter had heard the stories before, but he would never have bet that the whole bar would believe in them as well. "Then correct your statement, good sir," William said snidely with a tip of his own glass. "You've caught almost everything in these swamps." It was then that William saw what appeared to be genuine fear in the trapper's face turn to anger when two of the ladies nearest him snickered slightly under their breath. William decided to leave well enough alone and turn in for the night, but the young trapper's voice caught him as he moved to the stairs at the edge of the room. "What if I do catch him?" William sighed at the determination in the boy's face. "Well, best of luck to you," William said, but the trapper was not finished. "I could do it," he said, almost convincingly, if I really wanted to. I'd need proof of that, called out another patron, followed by a few more mutterances of agreement. You don't think I could? The trapper snapped back. William realized that he had probably rattled the boy's cage more than he should have, and stepped in to try to calm the situation. With your tales told here tonight, I'm sure you could. I tell you what, you bring in proof of catching one, and there's a $20 banknote in it for you. William thought it was harmless enough. It'd be something to at least keep the boy busy. For a man killer, the trapper scoffed. Make it 100, and you have yourself a deal. William smiled, but not near as big as his internal laughter. He knew his money was safe and sound, so what was the harm? With hard evidence, I'll agree to your terms, he announced to the room, and all of you stand as my witnesses. With that, William left the cheering room behind and retired to his room for the night. The next morning, as he was leaving for his day of business, William ran into the young trapper outside of the Owl Saloon. I'll be here tonight to collect my wage, the trapper announced in passing on his way out of town. William called back after him. Hard proof. Remember that. The rest of the day was business as usual for William. Nothing out of the ordinary, aside from sending word on the morning train that he would be one more day before returning home. By the end of the day, William had nearly forgotten about his little challenge to the young hunter, but the patrons of the saloon that night were quick to remind him, and as tired as he was, William lingered around the main room of the saloon late into the night, not surprised at all when the young braggart was nowhere to be seen. He was about to call it quits for the night when the doors of the Owl Saloon burst open, and there stood the young hunter, a dirty cloth bag held high as if it were a trophy. The saloon was abuzz with chatter as the young man dropped the bag on an empty table, then scanned the room for William. William's curiosity was piqued too, so he slowly rose from his chair and made his way to the table to hear the story for himself. The hunter went on to tell the story of encountering a large, wolf-like creature deep in the Manchac Swamp. It stood tall, like a man, only taller. The young man rushed about, nearly out of breath as he recounted his hunt. Its body was almost like us, but not at the same time. Stretched and twisted it was, but the head, that was a wolf, as clear as day. Even with that, though, this was no creation of God, I can tell you that. Straight from the pits of hell, this thing was. When William pushed his way through the crowd, the trapper locked eyes with him. Told you I could do it. I know these swamps like the back of my hand, day or night. William's mind struggled to keep up. You're telling me there's a Rougarou in that bag? You're not listening, the trapper scoffed. There's no way that monster would fit in there. But I'll tell you what is in there, mister. A Rougarou's paw. At the stunned silence of the crowd, the hunter continued. I was fresh on its tail, I was. Been tracking it well into the night. But the monster, it knew. Somewhere or another, it picked up on me, and the thing aimed to finish me off. But I saw him coming at the last moment. He came at me before I could get my rifle up. Would have tore my throat out too, if not for this. With that, the hunter stabbed a large bowie knife onto the top of the table. He tried for my neck, but I caught the thing by the wrist. We tumbled on the ground, and that's when I drew my knife. I got its paw in one fell swoop. It then ran off with a terrible scream, and by the time I got to my gun, it was gone. But I was able to save this. The hunter struggled to untie the canvas sack, his hands still shaking with adrenaline. The entire room was quiet as a mouse. so the young man continued with his story as he fought with the tied-up bag. I say paw, but it's somewhere in between paw and hand. Long, spindly fingers, twice as long as yours or mine. It might look sickly, but believe you me, it was the toughest thing I've tussled with, and wait until you see those long, black claws. Aggravation finally got the better of the trapper, so he snatched up his knife and sliced through the braided twine that held the bag closed. Then, with a few shakes of the upturned sack, the paw of the beast flopped out onto the tabletop. The entire room gasped in horror, but not at the sight of a monster's paw. No, this was no paw at all. This was a human hand, small and frail, and clearly feminine. I don't understand, stammered the hunter. It was a monster's paw, I swear it. That was the last thing William remembered hearing as he ran out of the saloon and into the darkness. He knew there'd be no train until morning, but he ran to the station anyway, and once there, he continued on, racing down the tracks all the way home to LaPlace. You see, William had recognized that hand, or the ring it wore anyway. It was the same one-of-a-kind ring his own grandmother had passed down to him, the same ring he had placed on his wife Madeline's hand the day they were wed. He raced all night, making it home before the sun even rose. He burst into his home, but before he could even call out to Madeline, there was her family, huddled in a dark corner. William stood there, fearing the worst, but Madeline's family slowly stood and parted, revealing Madeline herself, slouched over in an old rocking chair. William approached cautiously, but there was a hint of relief when Madeline raised her head. But still, his gut clenched at the look of shame on his wife's face. "Let me see your hand," he requested softly out of concern, disbelief, and fear, all at the same time. Madeline hesitated, but then raised her left arm, an arm that ended abruptly in a wrapped and bloodied shawl. She had been tended to well enough, but William still fetched the town's doctor, feigning an accident at the sawmill back in Ruddock. It was easy enough to believe, as Ruddock had no doctor of its own yet. The couple never spoke about what happened. They didn't have to. Each knew the other knew, and it was left at that. William was well out of his comfort zone by this point, but Madeline's family didn't seem to care. They were concerned for their daughter's health, all right, but as she healed, their worries seemed to drift away. Over time, William would pick up on murmurings that once a Rougarou was injured, the curse was lifted. All William could do was to follow the family's lead and hope that their beliefs were true. Life went on with no further incidents. William cut ties with the town of Ruddock, and over time, he was able to convince Madeline to move back with him to New Orleans, where they blended in with the business class of the ever-growing city. In 2 years' time, the couple welcomed a baby boy into their lives, but their midwife was caught off guard by a crescent-shaped birthmark on the infant's back. She claimed that the child was bewitched, but that all should be well enough as long as the parents kept a close eye on him during the times of a full moon. Times passed, though, and the parents breathed a sigh of relief once a handful of full moons were behind them. But as the child grew, Madeline had difficulties handling him, what with one hand and all, so they decided to hire a full-time nanny to assist. William and Madeline had not so much had talked and agreed on the idea when there was a knock at the door. There they found a woman inquiring for work. She was a strange woman, one unlike either had encountered before. She wore a heavy cloak that wrapped around her, concealing her face. Odd appearance aside, though, she seemed mild-natured enough, and the wages she asked for were not going to be beat. William knew this for sure. So the woman, named Michelle, was given the job and proved to be a valuable asset to the household. One day, though, when Michelle finally noticed the crescent-shaped birthmark on the infant's back, she was visibly taken aback. Madeline explained what the attending midwife had said and pointed out that it was just superstition, that they had seen no issues with the child at all. "This is not a bewitching," Michelle said in a hushed voice. "That's the mark of a Rougarou. He will have the curse upon his 16th birthday." Madeline became frantic at hearing this, insisting to know more, without sharing her own story, of course. Michelle saw the worry in the mother's eyes and offered a solution. Michelle claimed to know how to break the curse of a Rougarou. According to Michelle, they were to kill a pure white pigeon and smear the blood over the birthmark under the light of a full moon. Then lay the baby on its stomach, allowing the light from the full moon to shine down upon it. As the blood from the pigeon dried, the moon would take up the mark and the curse would be lifted from the child. Time was of the essence, though, in Madeline's mind. The next full moon was less than a week away. She confided in her husband William, and it took little to convince him that action was needed. It took some doing, but William was finally able to find a solid white pigeon from a marketplace vendor. The young family decided to perform their ritual away from the prying eyes of the big city, so they set out for a more rural setting under the disguise of visiting Madeline's family back in Laplace. Michelle accompanied them to the train station and wished them all the best, hoping for their quick return. They had a good old reunion with Madeline's family, biding their time until the night of the full moon finally came. Late that night, when the rest of the family had all turned in for the evening, William and Madeline slipped out of the family home with their baby boy and caged pigeon that William had stashed in a rickety old barn, and retreated to the solitude of the swamps. They found a small clearing, and William set about dispatching the pigeon as Madeline laid the baby on a small blanket on the ground. In short time, the ritual was done, and all that was left was to wait for the moon to rise over the forest. Their only comfort was the light of a single torch that William carried, and the couple huddled around their baby and simply waited as the sounds of swamp life echoed all around them. Then the time was at hand. The light of the full moon broke into their small clearing, and both Madeline and William backed away a bit, careful not to cast any shadows across their baby boy. Their nerves were set on edge as the swamp around them fell quiet, a strange, uneasy quietness. William could not shake the feeling that they were not alone, and turned to scan the darkness around them. But that brief moment of looking away would haunt William for the rest of his life, because, as he did so, Madeline screamed. William spun back around just in time to see a wolf-like creature lunge at their baby boy. Instinctively, William dropped his torch, raised the barrel of his shotgun, and fired. It appeared to be a grazing shot on the creature's neck or shoulder, but it was enough. It let out a yelp and retreated into the swamp, but not before William could see infant blood dripping from its snarling teeth. William and Madeline were left there in the swamp, shocked, mourning, and questioning everything they had ever been told. The next day, Michelle was found near the Laplace train station, dead, a gaping shotgun blast to her neck. And to this day, no one knows for sure if the ritual Michelle had given the young couple would have really worked, or if it was something Michelle needed done in order to lift her own curse. Out of everything I could find, that's my retelling of one of the most detailed accounts of any alleged true Rougarou encounters. Still though, to me, it seems to weave some Rougarou and werewolf folklore together. So maybe we should start with this. What is a Rougarou? Although the Rougarou is strictly a Cajun legend, it has roots that trace back to medieval France. The name Rougarou is an evolution from the French word loup-garou, the French word for werewolf, although the two names are sometimes still used interchangeably in some regions of Louisiana, even though most folklorists can't decide if the two creatures are similar or not. In early French tellings, the loup-garou was more of a large dog-like creature, resembling the early European stories of the werewolf. Mostly in those days, the stories of the loup-garou were used to scare children and get them to behave, or else the loup-garou would get them. It's generally believed that the stories of the loup-garou came to the Louisiana region by the way of French settlers and French-Canadian immigrants. But there in the New World, the legends of the loup-garou fermented and evolved in the swamplands into the Rougarou. The Cajun and Creole legends of the Rougarou describe the creatures as having the body of a man, but the head of a wolf or dog, with red, glowing eyes. The Rougarou is a supernatural creature, the result of a curse on a human being. The human afflicted with the curse of the Rougarou is able to change back and forth at will though, and it's said that even when in its beast form, the Rougarou retains its human intelligence and consciousness, giving the Rougarou nearly unlimited motivations behind its actions. The stories in Louisiana shifted from being used to scare kids to keep them in line, to scare Catholics and to stay in devout. If someone was not repentant of their sins, they were at risk of becoming a Rougarou. If someone were excommunicated, well, those chances grew exponentially. And one of the surefire ways to become a Rougarou in early Louisiana was to not follow the rules of Lent for 7 years in a row. Of course, those outside of the Catholic faith were not safe from the curse of the Rougarou either. If you survived an attack from the creature, you now was cursed to be a Rougarou. Some say that even locking eyes with the beast would open you up to the curse itself. Then stories evolved over time that swamp witches and voodoo practitioners could place the curse of the Rougarou on someone, and then use the creature as a tool or an enforcer to wreak havoc on whoever or wherever they saw fit. And it wasn't long before any and all strange, unexplained crimes were blamed on the Rougarou. So we see that the type of person that could become a Rougarou is widespread, so it should come as no surprise that their motivations would be widespread as well. It could be someone seeking revenge on whoever placed the curse on them. Or worse, they could be seeking revenge on someone they thought placed the curse on them. There would be the previously mentioned enslaved Rougarou, so to speak, forced to do the bidding of a controlling swamp witch. But perhaps the saddest state would be those innocent under the curse, out there only trying to free themselves from being a Rougarou, because one of the ways the curse can be broken is by being injured but surviving. In those scenarios, a seemingly aggressive, evil beast coming at you could just simply be trying to provoke you into hurting them. Of course, Anyone wanting to take that chance with a Rougarou are more of a gambling man than I am, especially with the fact that if a Rougarou injures you and you survive, then you are now a Rougarou, and the original person is now free from their curse. There is another way to break the curse of a Rougarou though: patience. Some legends state that the curse only lasts for 101 days. Then after that time, you're free. As with any other creature from folklore, there are ways to protect yourself from a Rougarou. One of the most bizarre ways is to lay out 13 small objects outside your door, historically nails, coins, or small stones. The belief in this is that the Rougarou can only count to 12, and the extra item will confuse it, thus causing the creature to start over and over again. So much for retaining their human intelligence, right? Still though, this is an interesting aspect of the legend that ties back to European folklore, such as with the vampire, fairies, and leprechauns. The main home of the Rougarou is said to be the area of the Manchac Swamp, although whether they are drawn there by some sort of supernatural force, or the reach of the curse stays semi-local to the region, is never discussed from what I can find. Of course, if you've seen my previous presentation on Julia Brown in the cursed town of Frenier, then you know that the Rougarou is by far not the only thing haunting the Manchac Swamp. Today, there are still sporadic reports and sightings of alleged Rougarou, despite the warnings of the curse on anyone telling the story, especially in the first 100 days. And in typical Louisiana fashion, the people around the Manchac Swamp has embraced the legend into their own popular culture. Houma, Louisiana hosts an annual Rougarou festival. The Audubon Zoo in New Orleans has its own Rougarou exhibit with a statue depicting the creature. And even the NBA team, the New Orleans Hornets, even thought about changing their name to the Rougarou at one point before settling on the Pelicans as their new name. But as festive and celebratory as those instances are, communities deep in the heart of the swamps still only mention the Rougarou by name in hushed whispers. For them, it's still something to be avoided, and if the legends are to be believed, it's something that should be feared. Anyone you meet on the street could be a Rougarou, and it seems that at any given time, and in a multitude of different ways, the curse of the Rougarou could find its way onto you.